Charles and Ivanka had been married for several years. To the outside world, they seemed like any other couple, two people building a life together, sharing dreams, and working toward a common future. But behind closed doors, their marriage was anything but perfect. Their days had become a cycle of arguments, some trivial, others cutting deep. Every disagreement seemed to widen the gap between them, an invisible chasm growing with each passing day. Charles, despite it all, loved Ivanka. He wasn't perfect, but he tried. He worked tirelessly, saving every penny so they could buy a home, a place where they could build something real, something lasting. It was his dream, their dream, or so he believed. One evening, like so many before, an argument erupted. It started over something small. Ivanka had asked for something, and Charles, exhausted from work, reminded her they couldn't afford it just yet. He expected frustration, maybe disappointment, but not the cold dismissal in her eyes. "Why do I have to explain this to you over and over again?" she snapped, her tone sharp with exasperation. Charles took a steadying breath, trying to keep his patience. "Ivanka, I'm trying. I really am. But sometimes it feels like nothing I do is ever enough for you." Her laugh was dry, humorless. "Trying? Is that what you call this? This isn't trying, Charles. This is you doing the bare minimum and expecting me to be grateful." The words hit him harder than she realized. Bare minimum. His sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the long hours, all dismissed with a single wave of her hand. He wanted to argue, to remind her of everything he had done. But what was the point? Nothing he said would change how she saw him. His patience snapped. He grabbed his keys and stormed out. "I can't do this right now," he muttered under his breath, leaving her standing there, indifferent. The cool night air barely registered as he walked aimlessly down the street, his thoughts a storm of frustration and exhaustion. But as he reached the corner, he realized he had left his wallet and car keys on the kitchen counter. Annoyed, but knowing he had no choice, he turned back. He opened the door quietly, not wanting to reignite the fight. But then he heard her voice. At first, he wasn't listening, only focused on grabbing his things. But then her words stopped him cold. "I settle for less," Ivanka said, her voice devoid of regret. A chill ran down his spine. His fingers hovered over his wallet as his heart pounded. "I should have been with Dean," she continued. "But I needed stability. Charles is a good man, but he was never the one I truly wanted." Everything clicked into place. The distance, the fights, the way she looked at him, not with love, but with tolerance. She had never wanted him. Not really. He picked up his wallet and keys, turned on his heel, and walked out. This time, he closed the door softly, as if sealing the chapter of his life that had just ended. He walked without direction, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had spent years believing their struggles were temporary, that his love was enough to see them through. But now he saw the truth. It had all been for nothing. He found himself in a bar, a place he rarely visited. It didn't matter. He needed somewhere to sit, to think, to let the reality of her confession settle in. He ordered a beer, took a slow sip, and let the bitterness linger. But it was nothing compared to the bitterness now gnawing at him from the inside. For years, he had fought for a future with her. But how do you fight for something that was never real? He thought about confronting her, demanding an explanation. But what would that change? She might apologize, maybe even shed a tear, but it wouldn't undo the truth. Her heart had never belonged to him. A quiet decision took shape in his mind. He would leave. Not for the night, not to cool off, but for good. As Ivanka slept, Charles sat in the dim glow of his laptop. If she wanted to be free, he would give her exactly that. But he wouldn't leave empty-handed. Logging into their joint savings account, he stared at the numbers on the screen. They had been saving for a house, but he had been the one making the sacrifices, the one depositing every spare dollar. With methodical precision, he transferred 80%, the portion he had earned, into secure investments. Not cash, nothing traceable, but valuable assets that he could liquidate later. He covered his tracks, erasing every trace of the transactions. Then, with quiet efficiency, he packed. Only the essentials, important documents, clothes, anything he might need to start over. Nothing sentimental. There was nothing left worth holding on to. Before he left, He sat at the desk, staring at the blank sheet of paper in front of him. There was nothing to argue about. The truth had already been spoken, just not to his face. He picked up a pen and wrote, his hand steady. I overheard everything. I won't stand in the way of your happiness. Go settle with your ideal partner. No accusations. No pleading. Just a final goodbye. By morning, Charles was gone. Ivanka woke up expecting another ordinary morning. She stretched, groggy from the night before, and reached for her phone. But as she stepped out of bed, her eyes caught sight of a small note sitting on the table. Something about it sent a chill through her. She picked it up, heart pounding. The moment her eyes scanned the words, her stomach dropped. He knew. A rush of panic surged through her veins. She read the note again, hoping she had misunderstood, that there was some explanation other than the one forming in her mind. But no, there was no mistake. He had left. Not for a few hours. Not to cool off, but for good. And worse, she had pushed him to this without even realizing it. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, fingers fumbling as she dialed his number. The call rang once, then cut off. Confused, she tried again, and again. Each attempt met with the same cold response, disconnected. Desperation clawed at her. She switched to texting, sending message after message. Each one remained unread. Then she opened her email, typing frantically, keeping it short, pleading for him to answer. But the response was immediate, undelivered. Her breath quickened. Something was wrong. Rushing to check his social media, she scrolled through her contacts, searching for his profile. Nothing. It was gone. Every trace of him, erased. It was as if he had never existed. Frantic, she called his workplace. Maybe, just maybe, he had gone there. For hours, no one picked up. When someone finally answered, her voice wavered as she asked about Charles. The response came casually, almost indifferent. Oh, Charles? He resigned this morning. Sent an email before office hours. Effective immediately. Her grip tightened around the phone. He had planned this. This was an impulsive decision, a knee-jerk reaction to their last fight. He had been deliberate, methodical. He had taken the time to remove himself from her life completely. He had vanished, leaving behind nothing but a note and the weight of her own words. For so long, she had assumed Charles would always be there, that no matter how cold she was, no matter how dismissive, he would stay. But now, standing alone in the emptiness of their home, staring at the last thing he had left behind, she realized she had pushed him too far, and there was no undoing it. But now, she no longer had to pretend. No more secrets. No more guilt. Charles was gone, which meant she could fully turn to Dean, the man she had always believed was her true choice. The affair, once whispered in stolen moments, no longer needed to be hidden. There was no husband standing in the way. At first, it felt like everything was falling into place. Dean said all the right things. He made her feel wanted, desired. He reassured her that she had made the right decision. With him, there was passion, excitement, a sense of freedom that she had convinced herself Charles could never provide. This was the life she had wanted, the life she felt she deserved. Months passed, and Ivanka took the final step in erasing Charles from her world. She filed for divorce. With no way to contact him, the court issued a default judgment in her favor. Just like that, she was legally single, free to move forward without looking back. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Then, the cracks began to show. Dean was charming, yes, but he was also distant, present in the way that mattered least, in words, in fleeting gestures, but absent where it truly counted. He avoided conversations about the future, brushing them off or changing the subject whenever she brought them up. And then, the truth began to unravel. Dean wasn't as devoted to her as she had assumed. He still entertained other women, maintained relationships outside of theirs. What she had thought was a deep, passionate love turned out to be nothing more than a convenient arrangement for him. She had left a man who had given her everything for someone who had never intended to offer her the same. The comparisons crept in. The things she once resented about Charles, the long work hours, his frugality, his quiet nature, suddenly felt different. Charles, despite their fights, had always been there. He had been reliable, steadfast. He had fought for their marriage. He had believed in their future. He had sacrificed his comfort, his dreams, his everything to build something real with her. And she had thrown it away. Dean, the man she had once believed was her true love, her ideal partner, had never been building anything at all. The realization hit slowly at first, like a dripping faucet. Then, all at once, like a dam breaking. She had never truly settled for less. She had lost more than she could ever get back. Years passed. Ivanka was still alone. Dean never became what she expected. Whenever she brought up marriage, he brushed it off, laughed it away, dismissed it as unnecessary. At first, she told herself it was just timing, that eventually he would commit to her the way she had left everything behind for him. But as time stretched on, the truth became impossible to ignore. Dean had never been serious about her. And worst of all, he never asked her to leave Charles. Those words haunted her every time they argued. I never asked you to leave your husband. Each time he said it, it cut deeper. Each time, it left her feeling smaller. Because he was right. He had never promised her forever. He had never begged her to choose him. That had been her decision. A decision she could never undo. Now, in the quiet moments when the noise faded and the nights felt too long, her thoughts wandered back to Charles. Where was he now? Had he moved on? Had he found someone new? Had he built the life they had once dreamed of, with another woman? The questions gnawed at her. The answers were ones she would never know. She had believed she was chasing happiness. Instead, she had run straight into regret. Somewhere, out there, Charles was living a new life. A life without her. And for the first time, she understood he had been right to leave.